Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our virtual open house, Wake BRT virtual open house. We are here to hold a live Q&A session and talk about various aspects of Wake BRT program. Next slide, please. My name is Mila Vega, and I am with the City of Raleigh Transportation Department Transit Division. I will provide a brief presentation to help orient us in the discussion. And after the presentation, we will introduce our panelists and open our question and answers section of the meeting today. Next slide, please. So just to orient us in the program, back in November of 2016, there was a successful referendum that provided funding for transit investment. And we also have an adopted Wake County Transit Plan that identifies a variety of transit improvement projects. There are four big moves that the plan is based on. And big move number 3, provide frequent, reliable urban transit. This is the area that includes bus rapid transit service. Next. So just a quick reminder what BRT is and how it's different from traditional regular bus service. BRT is a high frequency service. It has unique branding. It has features like enhanced stations. You can see a picture on your screen right now. It has longest span of service. For example, for Wake BRT program, we are looking at a span of service that starts at 4 a.m. and runs till midnight. It has transit signal priority, dedicated lanes, and specialized vehicles. Next. We have a total of 4 BRT corridors within our program. They all radiate from downtown Raleigh, heading east along New Bern, west along Western Boulevard, connecting to Cary, downtown Cary. Southern corridor connects us to Garner, and then we have a northern segment, again radiating from downtown Raleigh. In the northern direction. The most advanced corridor right now is New Bern Avenue. It has passed 30% design and it's in final design phase. We also are initiating design on western and southern corridors. Western corridor, if you have, you might have recently participated in a virtual Q&A session for Western corridor. We have selected the preferred routing, and Southern corridor is going through preferred route selection. We anticipate beginning work on route selection for the Northern corridor sometime next fall. Next slide. So as I mentioned, BRT is set apart from a traditional bus service by a variety of characteristics. One of them is branding. BRT will have a unique brand, and we kicked off this process. We have conducted public surveys. We have conducted stakeholder listening sessions. And we're beginning to see some themes emerging from this work, like creating a brand that recognizes regional nature, and as well as maybe looking at not necessarily including specific teams or specific individual names in the brand. Next. Station design, I've mentioned that BRT has enhanced stations, so we are also kicking off this part of the project development. I would like to highlight that right now we are gathering feedback. There's a survey that's live that will help us gather public input into station design that will be incorporated by the architects working on this project. Next slide. We also integrating art into the project and thinking about art early on as we are advancing design. We also understand that this is a very important component of the project. We have also another survey that's currently open. In addition to station survey, we have art survey. So if you haven't had an opportunity to complete the survey, please take a moment and provide your feedback, because it will help us shape art integration into the project. Next. This concludes my brief overview of various areas that we will be talking about. I'm going to hand over moderation of the meeting to Het Patel. Het Patel is also with City of Raleigh Transportation Department Transit Division, and he will be introducing our panelists and helping us with question and answer section of this discussion. Het?
Thanks, Mila. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and get the panelists up. And while we have all the panelists turn their videos on so we can introduce them, I will go ahead and at least get some housekeeping underway. So basically, my name is Het Patel, Senior Planner within the City of Raleigh. I will introduce the panelists, and then I will be monitoring the public input site for some of the chat that's ongoing with questions. So to the right of your video, there's a chat box. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box, and we'll be monitoring that throughout this entire session. If you would like to call in, right above your video, there is a phone number for public input and a code that you can use to dial in to the site as well. And there is a prompt that you can follow to get into a speaking queue to ask a question through the phone. So we will be monitoring that and bring you into the meeting to ask question if you would prefer to use the phone option. Would also want to say that we hope that you would keep the comments to the panelists as well as others respectful. We want to be able to get through all the comments that we get today and answer as many questions possible. And we will also say that, you know, we may not be able to answer all the questions within this hour that you have. So we are going to collect all the questions and produce a frequently asked questionnaire form that will be updated and uploaded to the website after this meeting. So with that, I will go through and introduce your panelists. So you've already heard from Mila Vega, who's the BRT program manager for the City of Raleigh. Myself, Het Patel, senior planner in the BRT team. David Eatman is the assistant director of transportation for the City of Raleigh. So he oversees the entire transit program and administration of all Go Raleigh services. Then we have Greg Sauer, who is the WSP consultant for working on the Wake BRT Southern and Western corridors, the 30% design, the preliminary design work that Mila mentioned. Then we have Mark Huffer with HNTB. He is the project manager for the system standards work, as well as New Bern Avenue final design. And so he's representing the New Bern Avenue project. And then we have Luke Volkmar with Neighboring Concepts. He is the architect who will be working on this station design component. And their team is the one that put together the visual preference survey that we have live right now that we're looking for some public feedback on. And last but not least, we also have Dare Coulter. She is the artist in residence, and she also has a live survey right now that is looking for a lot of feedback. So we would love to hear more from you guys if you have any questions for Dare in specific about art and art integration as it relates to bus rapid transit projects. So with that, bear with me just a second as I pull up the public input site on my end. My PowerPoint is still going, so I need to get that closed out.
And while Het is pulling up the questions, again, I want to thank everyone. And in advance, I just want to apologize in case there's any background noise. We're all working from home. I'm a proud owner of 2 large dogs, so I might be muting myself to make sure that you can actually hear the rest of the panelists.
All right, so I do not see any questions up in the chat yet, so we will start with some questions that we may have received prior to the meeting, because we did have the virtual open house live for some time now and had some options for people to provide comments there. So I think one of the things, Mila, you had kind of talked about was the BRT operations and how late service will be running. I think we've gotten a lot of questions in general about that as well as the frequency of how often buses might be running. Can you provide some feedback on that?
Yes, as part of the planning phase for BRT, before we even started the design phase, we looked at setting some service standards. And right now, it is planned that the entire BRT program of projects, once they'll come online, they will operate from 4 a.m. Until midnight on weekdays, with frequency of about every 10 minutes during peak hour and 15 minutes off peak. The span will be slightly lower on weekends. The service will begin at 5:30 and also operate till midnight. So there is obviously a hope for making service very convenient and accessible to a variety of riders. For example, people who work non-traditional shifts, maybe not necessarily 9 to 5, but hospital workers that would have basically shifts that would run through the entire day. Anything else you would like to add, Mark, as far as I know you are a BRT expert and you worked with a variety of different systems. Can you provide any additional perspective on a service and the
Yes.
frequency and quality?
Sure. Thanks, Mila. One of the biggest differences with BRT versus other other services is the frequency. And as Mila alluded to, it'll run every 10 minutes. And that's sort of been chosen, or that's been proven to be sort of the point at which you don't need a schedule. People can simply go to the stop. They don't have to know what time it is. A 10-minute wait is acceptable to most people. And that's only if you just missed it. And so if the bus, if you get in between buses, you only have 5-minute wait. And that's really one of the things that makes BRT so attractive is the enhanced shelters. These shelters and buses are going to be there. They're larger bus stops. So it's
Mark, I think
very much a premium service.
Mark, I think you're having technical difficulties with the audio. We can probably skip to the next question.
that sounds good. So I think Mark, towards the end there, was talking about BRT stations. So I think this is a good segue to ask Luke. I guess, we're currently in the process of doing the visual preference survey and getting community feedback on that. One of the main questions that a lot of people have with the median running transitway that we've identified for New Bern is how will people get to bus stations in the middle of the road? And how is the BRT station design incorporating some of those accessibility questions of getting to the bus station in the middle of the road?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Ed. Good evening, everybody. So for our median stations, we know that those are a challenge, especially in areas and streets that have a higher speed limit. So, one of the biggest things that we're doing is looking at the pedestrian crossings there. Those pedestrian crossings have to be larger, they have to be visible, they have to be easily identifiable by motorists. So the signaling for the lights themselves are also being integrated with crosswalks. So we'll have longer crossing durations that are integrated with pedestrian, both audible and visual signals. So that's the first part is, how do we make sure that we get people to the stations successfully and safely? Once they're there too, that station today in the median is going to be a little bit unique where we have to make sure that pedestrians are safe, they're protected, but then also, in amongst that protections, they also can see and feel safe, both protected from vehicles, but visually, so that, you don't feel like somebody could be hiding there, and that there's, the environment that we're creating is one that's pleasurable, one that's not harsh, but it's welcoming. So, you know, it'll be well lit. It'll be distinct and separate from everything else in the kind of the auto environment that you're used to seeing someone in that area. So, you know, I think we're bringing everything down to the pedestrian scale and making sure that we're trying to make sure their pedestrians feel safe.
Thanks, Luke. I gotta make sure I keep myself on unmute. So we did actually finally have some chat activity, or I think this is a question that came in through the phone. The question, I think this one maybe Mila, Greg, and Dare, all three of you guys may have something to kind of talk about on this, is if we have contacted the NC State School of Design to participate in any of the art and architecture planning around the BRT. I know the Western Corridor for us, NC State is a stakeholder and we do have a lot of meetings with them, but there was a comment or question about our coordination with the School of Design efforts.
There, I think that's your way, UNC State grad, so I'll let you jump.
Right. Okay, so that's actually what I was going to say. I'm like, we have state in the building. Technically, graduate class of 2015, College of Design with focus in art design. But as far as a formal communication bridge, there's not anything established yet. There's definitely time for something like that if it ends up being something that is conducive to both the things that are being created and some of the other stuff that happens a bit later. There are no guarantees, of course, with anything, but the beauty of the project, and hi to everyone who's here. Thank you so much for being here. I'm the artist in residence, and my job is to help coordinate artists who end up being bought in via a process called RFP, which are requests for proposals, basically structuring that system so that the people who are able to respond to artist calls are, you know, it's not just one person creating all the art. It's more that the thing becomes open to the community. So whether or not NC State and the College of Design specifically are bought into this particular part of the process, there's always time for collaboration at the point that actual arts integration is occurring and the collaborators are being identified. Thanks for your question.
Dare, I guess while you're talking about art, I think I want to give you another opportunity to sort of the current survey that we have live. I want to see if you have heard anything interesting out of the comments that you have received so far, and sort of how you see the next steps of the process in terms of tying into the work that Luke is doing on station design, and then starting to maybe even generate some themes for art integration.
Yeah, so excitingly enough, there's a lot of feedback that centers around the particular history of the area. So the special thing that I keep saying in the meetings when I talk to different people about BRT and arts integration is that the people who are involved in this project at the higher levels, they genuinely care about art, which is super exciting. And I'm gonna put a couple of y'all on the spot really quickly. You know, Mila, when we're in the meetings, like there are paintings in her background that change. And I asked Meg, I was like, is she an artist? She's like, yeah, she's an artist. So Luke is, there's a time that he answered the video call and he had this giant wall of his kids' drawings behind him. And it's just really sweet. And see Het, right, there's a dog with a tie behind Het. So it's like, it really is not just this disregard for art. I think art ends up being particularly special to a lot of us. And beyond that, it's good because that means that when we're looking at integrating art as far as what community members are interested in, it's not just like it's not a dot on a list, like, okay, we'll put something up there. I think there's this genuine care for what it is that comes up. So from community members thus far, themes really follow along the line of like representing history. And integrating whether or not it's just like representative history, but like things that point to things that were in these places or communities or neighborhoods or history that surrounds the corridor. Because one, it's quite a long corridor, but two, there's a lot of untold history. And I know Raleigh is doing a lot of stuff with public art to actually make sure that a lot of the stories that ended up either covered up or untold, that one, they're recorded, and that two, they actually find representation in public art pieces, which is super exciting. And I know, speaking back of College of Design, there's a lot of design work that's student-led and professor-led, with Kofi Boone in particular of NCSU, where it's, you know, making sure that there's community documentation and referencing these very, very special histories. So history seems to be very important. There's, in one record, there's, okay, we do want this stuff. There's another record that says we don't want this stuff. People seem to be, like the results that y'all saw about BRT and branding design, simultaneously people are excited about specific people and then also not excited about specific people. So it's at this point, it's still, we're in data collection phases. There was a meeting last night that I was on with a neighborhood community association. And so it's just waiting for that stuff to come in. So as many people who hear this, if you're a part of the corridor, please take the art survey. It's the next step becomes creating basically a visual glossary of what it is that gets mentioned as far as feedback is concerned. And then moving forward from there to figuring out the actual process of involving people in RFPs. So we have a great structure for that with my wonderful at the hip partner, Kelly McChesney, who's the public art director for City of Raleigh Arts. And then, you know, not hopefully, down the line, there'll be, this is what exists on behalf of stuff. I talked with Luke's team a few weeks back about points of integration, and Luke is just as excited as I am about making sure that art is really, really a thing. So it's coming, it's happening. We just need your input. So please take the survey. That was a very long answer.
Thank you, Dare. I think that's a great plug. I mean, we need to continue to try to get feedback on that component of this project as it relates to the entire system, as well as New Bern being the first corridor. You know, while we're talking about overall system components, I also want to bring Greg in with the southern and western corridors, which are about to start preliminary design. Greg, can you maybe explain to our listeners what really happens in this initial first phase of the preliminary design with the 0 to 30% work that we're doing? You know, how do we make decisions on bicycle pedestrian improvements for the project? Some of the station location considerations, just kind of give them a high level overview of what we would be doing.
Sure, thank you, Het. So 0 to 30% design is often described as conceptual design. And the way that we describe that is because things are not pinned down and there's still more design work to occur after that. But the intent is to really get a handle on what the community wants. So that is looking at, like you said, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, but then trying to also understand the land use to place stations. Where are places that people want to go? Where are places that people want to live, want to work, things like that. So there's a lot of community engagement that occurs with this. There's a lot of partnering with other agencies. I think there was a reference to NC State earlier on Western Corridor, Southern Corridor, as well as including a lot of information from town of Garner, and I guess town of Cary for Western as well. Excuse me. But the intent is to also try to get a feel for how much this will cost, because that's going to allow us to understand what are the types of running ways we're looking at. We were very lucky, I think, in designing some of the New Bern Avenue project because we have a very wide median that's there today. So we didn't have to bump out. I say we didn't. I'm not building this, so I'll be very careful about that. But the project team, we're not designing to move the curbs out. Excuse me. So the cost of that is going to be much lower than in a situation where you are going to move the curbs out. So we always have to weigh what is the balance between the effectiveness of the bus and the cost of the project, and how does that all come together with what the community really wants, and then also what is needed to make this successful. Mila provided a number of components that really define bus rapid transit, and I think Mark did a great job of describing the frequency, which I agree frequency is really important. I'm also really interested in reliability. So it's not only that you can just walk out and catch a bus every 15 minutes, is that you know it will take you 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get from your house to your job. So there are some traffic components that we have to look at as well, make sure that we can still maintain vehicles, but at the same time provide speed for buses. So I provided about 1 million things there, and I'm happy to go into more detail on any particular item. But I think really the wrap up is we have to touch a lot of different people and a lot of different ideas and bringing them together and have a vision more than an actual design.
Thanks, Greg. That was a good explanation of what happens in our early preliminary design phase. We finally do have a little bit more chat activity. So one of the next questions is, has a locally preferred alternative been selected for Western? And if so, how were the, what was the approval process for that selection? And so I can hand that off to Greg, but I guess before I do that, I will say the virtual open house does have some videos that are specific to each corridor. So if you watch that video and what the Western Boulevard Corridor study did, there were some more detailed explanations for how the locally preferred alternative was selected.
Thank you, Het. Excuse me. So after the initial Wake Transit Plan sales tax was passed, there was a major investment study that was performed that looked at all different types of BRT options within Wake County. Specifically along the Western corridor, there were three main routing ideas that came out. And through a process of working with the town of Cary, city of Raleigh, engaging public, those three were analyzed environmental impacts, how they might serve different types of demographics and populations. So there's often individuals that might be described as transit dependent that maybe don't have access to a car, excuse me, things of that nature. And then we also looked at what this would mean for the bus speed and bus reliability. And then again, bringing it all back to destinations. Where are places that people want to go? So we looked at all of these pieces of data together. You're never going to get a 100% yes on anything. So there is both a quantitative component as well as qualitative. But the decision that was made is the route that was picked really was pushed by the locations. It goes by a number of locations along Western Boulevard in Raleigh, as far as NC State, downtown, Dix, Pullman Park, things like that. And then going through Cary Town Center Boulevard, or Carytown Boulevard, excuse me, and then up Maynard and then to downtown Chatham, it touches a number of places within Cary that allows there to be an extension of the downtown. There's the Fenton development, which is coming online soon, and the Carolina Yards project, which is going to be a redevelopment of Carytown Center. So those were the main drivers. And as Het said, there's definitely information on the website as to a little bit more about those, and we can certainly provide more information as needed.
Thank you, Greg. So I want to ask a question for David. I think Greg has done a good job of explaining to us what happens in the preliminary design phase with 0 to 30%. And I think overall, we know, our listeners probably hopefully know, that the Wake Transit Plan has identified some funding that goes towards the BRT projects. Can you explain a little bit more in terms of how that funding matches with a federal ask for the project, and what that process really is like, and sort of give our viewers maybe an idea of how long to anticipate some of that processes could take? David, you're muted.
All right, I always do that at least once, so I appreciate that, Het. Thank you. And certainly, again, David Eatman, Transportation with the City of Raleigh. And as far as the funding goes, our entire program for the Wake Transit Plan certainly includes federal participation for the construction, and hopefully some reimbursement for our design work on all of our projects. Our base budgets are considered as a 50-50, so 50% local, 50% Wake Transit, and 50% federal. Under certain circumstances, we can get more than 50% under a small starts application. We can go up higher, but whenever you do that, you're balancing success with reimbursement because you are in a competitive environment nationally. So we have to think about that very carefully. The more you request, you may have another city that may request less. So you're competing against them, and certainly your financial capacity and your financial outlook on the project and how much you can bring to that project can determine that. So as we think about our projects, that's really a sliding scale. My apologies, Het, but it sounded like you were trying to hone in on more of a direct answer there instead of the overall federal mix there. Can you clarify a little bit more?
Yeah, no, I think that was pretty good. I think overall, it would also be helpful for people to sort of understand maybe how long that process can take typically. You know, I know we're going through it with New Bern first as our initial corridor because it's further in design. But, you know, we've gotten a lot of questions in the past about the overall time frame or implementation and the goal of Wake Transit Plan, which was to implement all 4 corridors by 2027. So just sort of getting an understanding of how long that federal process can take.
Yeah, so I'll use New Bern, for example, very quickly. New Bern went into project development. Through that process, a project development application can go in at any time for Federal Transit Administration review to determine if a project is eligible to be hopefully reimbursed later if you meet many criteria. And I would emphasize that there is a lot of criteria to meet in order to receive that federal funding. So you enter the project development first. Certainly New Bern's there. Western is underway, and Southern will be underway probably next. And we certainly think so. So project development is kind of like your first step. Then there's a ratings application, and ratings applications happen once a year. And they usually are due sometime in August of every year. And once you are rated, you will become eligible, and depending upon your rating, that is, as long as you're rated at a minimum level, which is kind of a medium level, as according to the Federal Transit Administration, you can become eligible for federal funding. I think it really depends on the corridor for when you may actually go through from project development to a ratings application. You really have to have all of your, you've heard Mr. Greg Sauer talk about all of the information that's needed in that preliminary design. But Greg is really trying to figure out what are the costs of and the major elements of this project, because that's what has to go into that ratings application for FTA to make a decision on where it ranks nationally against all of the other projects. And so when he's developing that information, we have to make sure that that's ready to go when we submit that. And that's only done once a year in August. And so you have to hit that mark. And if you're ready to hit that mark, bang, that happens. And so hopefully you get a good rating. And so then once you have a good rating, you've got everything from final design to 60% to NEPA, to many other factors that FTA will review, determine if your project is actually ready to be funded. And that's once you actually make it to a point where FTA said this is a worthy project to be funded. So I think that that's a highly variable answer. Certainly under the, something such as New Bern Avenue, I would hate to predict, but we are very successful in our ratings application with that project. And so certainly it would be nice to think that we would have some idea of where funding would, what type of funding we would have in calendar year 21. And for the other corridors, it really depends on all of those benchmarks, which have to align with specific dates. I know that's kind of a downer for an exact answer, so my apologies there, but it is highly variable.
Yep, I think that's good. And I think overall it helps people understand that the process has a lot of steps, and that is sometimes why it takes so long for implementation of certain types of projects like these, like large capital investments. So I think that's a good way to explain the overall arching view of that. We did get another caller come in and ask a question. They were excited about BRT, and they are excited about the benefits of more frequency and more service, but they asked if there would be other benefits like upgraded technology. And so I think this goes to, probably all of our panelists, anyone that wants to jump in to answer that question. I know, Mark, you guys are working on system standards, which has a huge technology component to it. Stations are going to have some technology improvements that are also going to happen. So I'd say we start with Mark, and then we'll hand it off to whoever else wants to add something else to it.
Can you hear me now, Het? Okay, I'm
much
sorry,
better.
I don't know what happened to that. Yeah, so one of our tasks is to develop standard or
Mark, we may have to come back to you. It looks like as
really
you begin to speak, we are getting some technology. Maybe you want to try to turn your video off and see if your audio only functions a little bit better. And in the meantime, Greg or Luke, anyone else want to start with the technology answer?
Sure. So one of the exciting things about bus rapid transit is you do get to leverage a number of different technology applications. So one of the easiest and most beneficial, I believe, to a customer is to be able to walk up to the station and have a sign that says, you know, the next bus is coming in 5 minutes, 7 minutes, something like that. Again, getting back to this idea that you don't have to have a schedule in order to use this bus. The second is using offboard fare collection. So this is different than the typical bus service where I guess under pre-COVID times, you would step onto the bus, you would pay your fare to the driver and then move back. In an effort to speed up how much time the bus is staying at the station, you actually pay for your fare first. So there's a separate ticket machine, and it gives you a receipt that shows that you've paid already. And then the third piece of this, which is probably most beneficial to the vehicle itself, is something called transit signal priority. And what this is basically the bus is outfitted, or a bus is outfitted with a transmitter. Let's just say it's a radio transmitter for the sake of ease. And this transmitter is able to communicate with the traffic signal and essentially say to the traffic signal, hey, I'm a bus, I'm coming, I'll be at the signal, in 15 seconds. And in the event that the intersection was, or the signal was going to put a red light on the road that the bus was coming on, depending on what type of rules and other things that we have programmed in, it could keep the green light on until the bus got through. So that's one of the really great applications. And then, there's some other things. Most of these buses are going to have some premium amenities. There's likely going to be Wi-Fi on these. There's going to be, some different variable message screens and other information like that. And then one of the basic pieces that is outfitted already on all the bus fleet here in Raleigh is something called AVL, Automatic Vehicle Location, and that allows you in real time to know where the bus is, and you can look on a map and see how it's moving around.
And so that real-time arrival information, right, Luke? So I think that is something from a technology perspective for the users. The stations can also have this information, so it's easier for people to identify when a bus may be coming and how long they may be waiting on the stations, even though the goal of BRT is not to have people waiting for too long. But in case you are at the station, you would have more information at your hands.
Yeah, exactly. We'd have the real-time arrival information that you've mentioned. So there'd almost be a countdown timer or a countdown clock with, both the visual cue, and then there's the ability to integrate that with an audio cue as well. So you get 5-minute or 1-minute notices for when the bus will arrive. At the stations level, there's also several other, I'd say, technology upgrades that you may not experience elsewhere. So on the safety side, there's cameras, there's blue light phones, there's all this back-end technology to make sure that occupants feel safe. And I may pitch it over to Mark. I know Mark and his team have some really great examples from the Kansas City line about, the station area, integration with digital signage, real-time maps about amenities around the station and retail and access to food and things like that.
Yeah, if I may,
Mark, you want to give it another try?
Yeah. So one of the things that will occur on this project on New Bern is that all the stations will be connected by fiber. So that does give us some options in terms of additional technology innovations that we can bring to each station. And Luke was talking about the Kansas City example. We actually were able to put in touch screen video kiosks at the station because of that fiber connectivity. And then you could use that to show events around the community, around the station, make emergency announcements if that station was out of service because of a detour as a result of a fire or a parade. Really customized information that you're able to give to each of the stations. It gives the customers a much better sense of connectivity to the system, and it's a higher level of customer service because you can communicate to them in real time.
That's great. So I think I want to go back. I think there was a couple more chat questions that came in while we had this.
Can I
go
add
ahead
something
there.
to that too?
Yeah.
So this isn't necessarily a technological thing, but it's something that I was really excited about. We had a meeting where we're talking about, I think that was in the branding, one of the branding meetings, and this woman was like, I love when a bus kneels, and she's talking about, you know, that sound where it goes and it like shrinks. So the beauty of the stations in the middle is that they will have ramps that are the same height as where the bus is at. So unfortunately, the buses won't kneel like in those places, but I think for time savings and everything, it's something that I really, really thought was neat that eliminates that part of the process for bus ridership.
Well, and Dare, the real advantage of that is that individuals that are in a wheelchair or using mobility devices can enter the bus immediately. They don't have to wait for a deployment of a ramp or the bus to lower. So it increases the mobility options for those that are using mobility devices.
And Het, I probably will redirect this to you because this is very near to your heart. But also we are looking at integration of bicycles and making sure that people who ride bikes, they can actually board the buses. So while it's still work in progress, but you want to kind of talk about some of the considerations?
Yeah, so yeah, we're definitely from a system standards perspective, are looking at how many bicycles are used along these corridors and the routes. And, with BRT, we're trying to make the service more efficient and faster and having someone, get off a BRT station, putting the bus in front of the vehicle slows down that onboarding process for bicyclists. And so one of the things from a technology perspective that a BRT bus that we would be looking at, like a 60-foot articulated bus, could handle is bicycle racks within the buses. I know that kind of takes some of the seating away, but there are definitely examples in other systems that are doing that to where buses or bicyclists can board onto the bus from the back of the bus and go directly and put their bicycle up on a rack and have a much faster and smoother boarding process. And so that's something that we are definitely looking at from a technology perspective. So I want to go back to one of the chat questions that came in. And I think this was Greg earlier when you were talking about the Western Corridor locally preferred alternative. There was a question that came in about what will the design for Jones Franklin and Western intersection look like with the Western Boulevard extension near Buck Jones? And I'll let you answer that one.
Great, thank you. That is a really tough area. Anybody who's driven through there can appreciate the number of roads that are coming together. And interestingly enough, the city of Raleigh has had plans to change that for, I don't know, probably 40 years at this point, and really haven't had the impetus to do it. So while I can't provide any specific design right now, I will tell you that we're going to be looking at it from an efficiency standpoint, again, for the bus, for travel, both in bike, pedestrian, and excuse me, vehicles. Safety is a really big concern in that area, so we're going to be making sure that we look at that. And then also preserving access to land use. One of the purposes of this project is not to come in and blow things up and redefine everything as far as how travel works. So we're looking at both the future land use, that's one thing we think of, but also existing today. So again, we're going to be making sure that there's access. And as the project progresses, we will certainly be showing to the public some different concepts as to how to get through that area.
Thanks, Greg. I think there's some excitement on some of the comments. So these are more statements. Someone chimed in and talked about how they, when they were visiting Richmond, accidentally fell upon the Pulse BRT and experienced that, and how beneficial that was for them when they visited there. So for others that have not experienced BRT, in cities, and Mark, maybe you can kind of help with this, some comparable cities that have BRT and sort of if anyone wants to get an experience of what that is like before it comes to Raleigh, what cities might they want to look at?
Sure. One of the beauties of that so many mid-sized cities have adopted the technology. And am I not, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I would just keep your
Okay.
video off.
Yeah, I'm sorry, so many mid-sized cities have adopted the technology. You know, we think about transit in big East Coast cities or the West Coast, but BRT has really helped to level that field and is expanded. And there are probably 40 cities around the country now, maybe even more, that have BRT. Richmond, of course, is the closest. New Bern will be the first in the state of North Carolina, but Atlanta is working on BRT. I was familiar with Kansas City. Omaha just opened their BRT system today, as a matter of fact. So it is the nation's newest BRT system. So a lot of opportunities to experiment and ride BRT when we get to the point we start traveling again.
Yeah, everyone's waiting for that one. So I think there's also a few other questions. I mean, we still have 15 more minutes. I'm monitoring the chat still, or the phone line. We haven't had any new activity. So I'm going to go back to a question that we had received prior to the meeting. And this may be both for Mark and Luke, and this is specific to New Bern. It said, can you talk about the Longview Median Transit Station located near Clarendon and Crescent? So that's kind of specific. And sort of, I guess, where would the station be located, center, side of the road? And then what type of noise impacts could be considered for residences and apartment buildings around that area? And I think the question specifically was more about, you know, auditory announcements at stations. And so Mark and then Luke, if you guys both want to talk about context sensitive solutions for our station planning that we're currently working on and how that would integrate, you know, what type of announcements and noise considerations we would have.
Sure. I'll start and then I'll throw it over to Luke. We have stations that are in urban areas and some that are more in suburban areas. And one of the things that we will pay attention to is the noise as well as light. These stations will be lit, but we want them to be lit in a sensitive manner that makes them safe, but doesn't bleed into communities or into homes. And the same with the announcements at stations or the audio announcements off of buses. So that's something that we'll pay attention to and monitor, and they probably will be adjusted by station. Luke, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I think you hinted about the idea of stations being able to scale up and down and being context sensitive. So, you know, we've been, as a team, we've talking a lot about this idea of a kit of parts. So, you know, the stations along the entire corridor need to be recognizable. They all need to be branded in a similar manner. And then they need to have similar materials, but they don't have to be the same solution. So they need to be able to scale up and down to make sure that they're context specific and they're cited appropriately, both for ridership as well as just, you know, the neighborhood that they sit in. The same solution in downtown is not going to be the same solution as in a suburban or a residential area. So I would say that's the starting point. From there, you know, we do look at specific solutions. So, you know, just like you shine a light, we want to make sure that, you know, the glare from the stations, for the light and the light, they call that light trespass, that all of that is specific to the station and the approach to the station. There's no light trespass that goes beyond the station constraints. The same is true for the audible. You know, as you shine a light bulb, you know, for the speakers, the sound travels the same way. So we want to make sure that, you know, sound is traveling down, or sound is mounted, speakers are mounted in the canopy and projecting sound back towards occupants, but not out into the road and not towards the residential neighborhoods. So, you know, that's a very intentional design solution that we get to a little bit further into the process. But that's definitely something that we'll be mindful of.
All right, thanks, Mark and Luke. So I think we have another chat question. This one is going to be for David. This question is, so I currently commute to work on Go Raleigh buses today. Will the BRT system integrate with the Go Raleigh system with passes and ease I guess making the commute even easier than it already is, and making sure that we keep free Wi-Fi?
So thank you, Het. And yes, so starting with the Wi-Fi, we have Wi-Fi on the buses now. That's actually become part of our normal bus procurement, one of our elements of every bus. So certainly that will continue into the future. When we think about commuting, we have a pretty seamless fare structure across the triangle currently, where you can buy a single pass and travel from Raleigh to really to Chapel Hill through Go Triangle, RTP, Durham, Cary. And one thing that people may not know is that our BRT system is actually programmed to carry the same fare structure as Go Raleigh as well. So that will be a seamless structure. So we are developing the network to connect to at key points to the existing Go Raleigh network. So we really think of the BRT network, once it's completely built out, as a real high frequency connection between many crosstowns and other radial routes that will also connect with those services. So it really will be truly a seamless network as far as fare structure goes. And we think that it will provide a great amount of not only increased infrastructure experience with stations and buses, but certainly some travel time savings as well, as we will be looking at or are planning dedicated corridors on many legs of our routes. And when I say dedicated corridors for buses, that is.
Thanks, David. I think you'd mentioned in there, the passes and fare and the cost being the same. I'm going to ask Mila. I know the regional systems are looking at mobile ticketing, and BRT is supposed to have off-board fare payments. So can you speak a little bit more about how that work will be integrated with mobile ticketing in the future with BRT passes and considerations?
Yes, of course. I think mobile ticketing and opportunities to prepay for your fare in advance is becoming more important considering current situation. So as that conversation is happening in the regional level, we're also thinking about services that will be added to the system in the near future, such as BRT. So we're working on ensuring this open communication and making sure that the systems can get integrated into the new format.
Thank you. So we're coming up to about 7 minutes out from the end of our meeting. I'm not seeing any more live chat questions or phone speakers willing to come in to ask questions. I'll maybe just open it up for the panelists to see if they want to add anything else, especially with Dare or Mark, or Luke, anyone looking for specific feedback on current portions of the project.
I think it would be good to wrap up this meeting the same way that Western Boulevard meeting was wrapped up, and have a question for each panelist about what excites you about BRT and the common service. And I think we'll save Dare for the last, because she's the most energetic person out of all of us. So that would be a great closing. But I'll hand it off to David. David, would you like to talk about what one thing that excites you about this new service that's coming along?
So it's probably oversimplified, but for me, it's very exciting because the city of Raleigh And really, North Carolina to this point has never experienced a high quality BRT system. And for us to be working on this and for this first New Bern project to be advancing as nicely as it is, as well as all of the work that's going into the Western, Southern, and then in the future, the Northern. That's really what excites me. It will be a different experience, infrastructure, frequency, and that's truly, I think, what will be the game changer for us.
I'll go ahead and let Mark or Greg go first. So we'll start with them.
I'll just jump in real quick. What I think is really exciting is that Raleigh and Wake County are planning 4 corridors at once, and that you're building a BRT network, not just a line. Many communities build a line, and then 5 or 6 years they try to add another one and then another one. This is planned to be a network of interconnectivity and connected BRT, and I think it's really exciting. It's unique, and I think it's very forward thinking.
I'm really excited about the opportunity to improve the quality of life. There's a number of individuals, as I mentioned earlier, that could be described as transit dependent and might not have the opportunities to get to work on the other side of town, get to a place that they want to purchase food, some of those things. And the bus rapid transit lines and system, as Mark was saying, really expands the footprint of what somebody can do. So it may open up a new employment opportunity. It may allow you to go to a recreation activity you wouldn't normally go. And it really empowers people to have some control over their lives and really make clear decisions. So at the end of the day, again, I think it's all about improving the quality of life.
All right, so I'll go ahead and step in here too. Greg, I think you stole mine a little bit. So for me, these projects are all about the people. You know, I think for all of us, it's about the people that we serve every day, and the impact that this project can have on an individual's life, on a community's life, an entire region's life. To hear Mark talk about, 4 regions coming at one time, the access to jobs, the access to education, the access to food and services that is reliable now too. I mean, that's a game changer, and that's what gets me really excited.
I guess I'll jump in, and for me, I think I like simple things, and I think the simplicity of using the service excites me, because I know that many people, just from talking to them, even my friends, when we used to go before the pandemic on trips together, and I encourage them to use transit. I know they get a little bit intimidated by bus service and the schedule and the frequency, and trying to figure out where this line goes. I think the simplicity of BRT, a straight shot from say one downtown Raleigh to downtown Cary, and simplicity of knowing that you really don't need a schedule, and simplicity of knowing that you don't have to worry about getting home early because the bus will still be there. It's very attractive in my mind. Simplicity of service is something that I'm excited about. Do you want to jump in and kind of talk about what excites you?
Of course. And if I say everything, that's a really lame answer. And if I say the art, then that would be a lame answer too, because of course I'm excited about the art. But I think, it's more or less an echo of everything else. Back when I was in college, I used to take the bus from State to Nightdale, and it was 2 hours one way. And I remember being cold, and I remember texting the number on the bus signs, is there a bus coming? And, standing outside of the College of Design that got mentioned earlier. So I think really the concept that it's the idea of not having to worry about a schedule is something that's so cool. But beyond that, there's something that came up in one of the discussions. Someone was like, the BRT has to focus on who the choice rider is. And I think in development of major cities, you see a lot of people, particularly Black people, feel, disenfranchised and ignored by these major things that happen. But the bottom line is that no matter what it is that is happening, the BRT is really functioning with all of the people in mind, and in particular, the people who are transit dependent and the people who are in areas where It's not as simple as, okay, well, I don't have a car and then I need to get to work, but work is going to take me an hour and a half because the concept that the choice rider really is the average person is something that's super special to me. The fact that, FAIR, the objective to keep it at the same price and something that's reasonable is something where when someone says, okay, well, I have a car that breaks because I have the point A to point B car that's parked outside and it's not necessarily going to live forever. So, knowing that I can hop on a bus, knowing that other people in that same boat are going to be able to get to the activities that they enjoy, to make it to work, with COVID, visiting people that you care about, like if it's necessary, stuff like that is really, really cool to me. And that plus the art, and that's, very verbose, but really there's a lot of stuff that I think is pretty neat. So, yeah.
All right. So I guess we're at 7 o'clock here. I want to say thanks to everyone that joined the public input site for our live meeting. Thanks for all the people that participated in providing comments. We really appreciate it. We want to continue to hear from you. And so we are still live on the virtual open house site until November 30th. There are opportunities to provide feedback on the 2 surveys or provide general comments and questions. And if there was anything that we did not get to today, we will take those comments and provide a written frequently asked question document after this virtual open house period is ended on November 30th. So we'll work on that. Mila, do you want to say anything else in closing?
No, I just want to thank everyone, thank the panelists and thank the public for your joining, and thank you for bearing with us while we're trying to work through the virtual environment and troubleshooting of technical difficulties. We definitely appreciate your participation and patience and ongoing support. Thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you.